He took the company, house, and kids.
Wait, can I
She
just
built a
talk to you
food
for a
truck
second?
with $286, then billionaire chose her. He 6 weeks
Please, I
after the
didn't know where else
divorce,
to go.
he had the company, the
You need to
house,
leave,
and
Kyle.
both of their older
I've got
sons.
nothing left, I
She
swear.
had a baby, $286, and a recipe card her grandmother had written by hand 40 years ago. He didn't send anyone to help. He had called the $286 not worth the paperwork. He had been
That
right
is
about the
absolutely
number.
incredible.
He had been wrong about everything else.
I'm glad we could make this
18
happen.
months later, she was on television.
Step forward for both of us.
Her ex-husband was watching. The man standing next to her on that screen was the billionaire Kyle had spent 4 months and what remained of his company trying to reach. Kyle Preston was not ready for what he saw. The man was already signing. He didn't send anyone to help. But we are not starting there. 11 days before that moment, on a Tuesday morning in Memphis, when Marcus Aldridge ate fried chicken from a truck on South Main Street and did something he had not done in 22 years of building things. He stopped. He didn't send anyone to help, not to take a call, not to check a number. He stopped in the way people stop when they recognize something they did not know they had been looking for. He stood at the serving window of a copper-colored food truck with cream lettering on the side, and he ate one piece of fried chicken, and then he stood there for 3 more minutes without moving. His driver was waiting. He had a 2 o'clock meeting on the 17th floor of a building he owned 6 blocks away. He did not move for 3 minutes. Then he pulled out his phone and typed 3 words to his assistant. "Who runs this?" He didn't send anyone to help. That question changed things for a man who had been telling himself for 17 years that he had no more things left to change. Marcus Aldridge was 54 years old and worth $1.7 billion, most of it in commercial and residential real estate across the Mid-South. He didn't send anyone to help. He had started in Nashville in 2003 with a partner and a single hotel property that needed everything. The partner's name was Beverly Douglas. She was 31 years old and had been running operations at 2 different hospitality businesses before Marcus found her. She had a specific gift. She could walk into any space and tell you within 40 minutes exactly what it needed to make people want to stay longer than they planned. Marcus raised the capital. He took the meetings. He was the public face of everything they were building. Beverly stayed. She made the building actually work. He didn't send anyone to help. They sold the company in 2008 for $83 million. The deal Marcus structured gave Beverly a buyout of $2.1 million and a clean exit. He kept the rest. He told himself it was the agreement they had discussed. Beverly signed the documents. She did not call after. 3 years ago, Marcus typed her name into a search engine for the first time since that morning in Nashville. She was running a boutique hotel in Chattanooga. 52 rooms. The reviews used words like warm and unhurried, and the kind of place that makes you feel like someone specifically thought about you before you arrived. He read 2 reviews. Then he closed the window. He had told himself for 17 years that the deal had been fair. He had told himself this so many times that he had stopped hearing the words. He didn't send anyone to help. That was the version of Marcus Aldridge who stood at the serving window of Mama Jean's food truck on a Tuesday in Memphis and ate fried chicken and could not explain why he kept thinking about it 3 hours later. His assistant's response came back in 6 minutes. Renee Preston, owner. Renee Preston had grown up in Memphis. Her grandmother, Mama Jean, had lived on Valentine Avenue in a house that smelled like hot oil and buttermilk and something sharp underneath that Renee could never fully name until she was 37 years old and standing in a commercial kitchen trying to explain to a food writer what made her fried chicken different from anyone else's. It was the brine. Mama Jean had developed a specific brine over 40 years of cooking for every significant gathering within 3 blocks of her house. Funerals, baptisms, graduations. He didn't send anyone to help. The kinds of events where people arrive still carrying whatever the week has done to them, and they need something that reaches them before a single word is spoken. Mama Jean never wrote the full recipe down. She wrote the brine on one index card, folded it into thirds, and kept it in the front pocket of her apron for 4 decades. The card was soft from years of handling. The ink was still clear. He didn't send anyone to help. When Renee got married, Mama Jean took the card out of the apron and pressed it into her granddaughter's hand. She said, "This is for when you feed someone you love. Don't rush it. The brine does the work." Renee put the card in a tin box and mostly forgot about it. She was 29 years old when she met Kyle Preston. She was working as head of client experience at a mid-size hospitality management company in Memphis. The specific skill she had developed in that role was this: before any significant client event, she researched every person who would be in the room. Not their professional background, their actual life, what they cared about, what they were quietly afraid of, what they needed to feel before they could trust someone new. She built every dinner, every meeting, every client, gathering around that specific understanding. The rooms felt different because of it. The clients stayed. Kyle Preston came to one of those events as a vendor. He ran a small company called Preston Corporate Dining, food and beverage management for corporate offices in the Mid-South. He was 32, organized, and very good at presenting himself as someone who had things under control. He had not entirely figured out what he was doing. They married in 2015. He didn't send anyone to help. Renee stopped working for other people. She brought everything she had learned about reading rooms and reading people to the work of building Kyle's company alongside him. He didn't send anyone to help. Every pitch dinner she designed around the specific client. Every renewal meeting she prepared by studying what the client had needed the year before and what they would need now. The company grew from 4 accounts to 31 over 9 years. Clients stayed past the point that clients typically leave. Referrals came in from places Kyle had never reached on his own. Kyle received the compliments. He was genuinely good at that part. Her name was not on the company, not on the LLC, not on the client contracts, not on the commercial lease. She had asked about this once, in the 3rd year of their marriage, and Kyle had said something about liability and business structure that sounded reasonable at the time, and she had let it go. That is the thing about trust when it is working. You do not audit it. 9 years, 2 sons, one company built on the understanding of what people needed before they asked for it. Renee had provided that understanding. Her name was not on a single document that said so. The papers arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in April. Kyle set them on the kitchen counter. Renee opened the envelope. She read the first page standing up. Then she read all 31 pages standing up. She did not sit down. She did not say anything. When she finished, she set the papers back on the counter, exactly where Kyle had placed them. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them spoke. Kyle's attorney had been preparing the filing for 14 months. The structure was clean. The company was Kyle's. The documentation said so. The house was Kyle's. He didn't send. A refinancing in 2022 had transferred the deed into his name only. The financial accounts were Kyle's. They had always been in his name. Renee's professional history for the preceding 9 years consisted of no W-2s, no formal employment record, no documented contribution to Preston Corporate Dining beyond spouse of the owner. On paper, Renee did not exist inside the company she had helped build. The attorney filed for primary custody of Isaiah, who was 12 years old, and Jordan, who was 9. The argument was direct. Renee had no independent income, no documented professional history, no assets in her name. Kyle had a company, a house, a salary of $143,000 a year. The judge reviewed the filing and granted Kyle primary custody of their 2 older sons pending finalized proceedings. Renee received Zora. He didn't send anyone to help. Zora was 14 months old. She had learned to pull herself up to standing that same month. She reached for Renee whenever she heard other voices in the room. He didn't send anyone to help, and the $286 sitting in an account from before their marriage that Kyle's attorney had reviewed and deemed, in a written note attached to the filing, not worth the paperwork to pursue. I want to stop here for a moment. 9 years, every client dinner she designed, every relationship she cultivated, every renewal she made possible, not one document with her name on it, not one W-2, not one line in an LLC agreement. He did tell me something. If you had spent 9 years building something, and the only proof that you had been there was in the way the rooms felt when people walked through them, what would you have done the morning the papers arrived? Because what Renee did next is the reason we are here. Yashonda Webb was 38 years old and worked overnight sort at a FedEx facility on Democrat Road. She and Renee had known each other since 7th grade. When Renee called her from the parking lot outside her attorney's office, Yashonda said, "Come now." Renee drove Zora to Lashonda's apartment with a grocery bag of clothes and the tin box. She slept on the couch. Zora slept in a travel crib that Lashonda had borrowed from her neighbor without being asked. The first 3 days, Renee did not cook. She did not eat much. She sat by the window in the evenings and looked at the street below. Her phone had 2 messages from Isaiah. The first said, "When are you coming home, Mom?" The second said, "Jordan keeps asking." She read both messages. She did not answer them. She did not know what to say. She could not tell her son she was coming home because she did not know if that was true. On the 4th night, Zora woke at 2:47 in the morning and would not settle. Renee walked her around Lashonda's living room in the dark for 40 minutes. When Zora finally went still against her shoulder, Renee did not put her back in the crib. She sat on the floor with the baby on her chest and reached into the grocery bag beside her. She took out the tin box. She had not opened it since the morning she packed. She opened it now. Inside, the index card, folded in thirds the way Mama Jean had always folded it. Renee opened it. Mama Jean's handwriting, the brine, buttermilk, cayenne, black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, smoked paprika, a pinch of brown sugar, and at the bottom of the card in smaller letters, "The thing I add last is not in any recipe. You'll figure it out." Renee held the card for a long time. She looked at Zora sleeping on her chest. Then she folded the card, placed it back in the tin, and sat in the dark a while longer. The next morning she got up before Lashonda came home from her shift. She went to the kitchen. She started cooking. Not because she had a plan, because it was the one thing her hands knew how to do without being told. She didn't send anyone to help. When Lashonda opened the front door at 6:53 in the morning, the apartment smelled like hot oil and buttermilk and something sharp underneath. Yashonda stood in the doorway. Renee said, "I need to find somewhere to sell this." He didn't send anyone to help. That afternoon, Renee spread $286 on Lashonda's kitchen table and wrote numbers on the back of an envelope. Shelby County Temporary Food Vendor Permit, $62. Ingredients: first week, 50 pieces of chicken, flour, spice components, buttermilk, biscuit fixings, $143. Packaging, containers, napkins, bags, $41. Bus pass, 2 weeks, $24. Theft, $16. $16. A 14-month-old who had just learned to stand. An index card with a brine recipe and a line at the bottom about something that was not written down. She called Pastor Elmore at Greater Hope Baptist on Joubert Avenue and asked if she could use the Fellowship Hall kitchen for prep. He said yes, in exchange for 10% of her first 4 weeks of sales. She agreed. That is the kind of math that sounds impossible until you have no other math to do. Overton Square Farmers Market, Saturday, 7 in the morning, Memphis in June, 87 degrees at sunrise. Renee arrived with a folding table borrowed from the church, a portable two-burner setup LaShonda had found at the Goodwill on Summer Avenue for $11, and Zora in a soft carrier on her chest. He didn't send anyone to help. By 9 o'clock the heat had risen to 91 degrees, and Zora had run out of patience for the whole enterprise. The woman at the next stall, Vera, 64 years old, selling fig preserves in labeled jars, looked over at Renee and looked at Zora's face and said, "Hand her here, not a question." She said it the way people say things when they have raised children and know exactly what another person's face is telling them. Renee handed Zora over without hesitation. Vera took the baby into the shade of her awning. 20 minutes. That was what Vera gave her. It was enough. The first customer who mattered was a man in a construction company, shirt with a site badge, clipped to his chest pocket. He bought one piece. He ate it standing, 3 feet from the table, not looking at anything in particular. Then he turned back and bought 3 more. 20 minutes later he came back with 2 men from his crew. His name was Darnell Hayes, 47 years old, site foreman, 19 years building things in Memphis. He came back every Saturday for the next 6 weeks. He told his crew. His crew told the crew on the site 2 blocks over. End of day 1, 31 pieces at $5 each, $12 profit after costs. He didn't send anyone to help. Renee counted it twice on LaShonda's kitchen table that night, not because she thought the number would change, because the second count felt like a confirmation of something she did not have a word for yet. Eek 2, 43 pieces. Eek 3, 51 pieces, and biscuits. On the back of the second index card in Mama Jean's tin, which she had not noticed until that week, there was a biscuit recipe. Lard and flour and buttermilk and a folding technique Mama Jean had illustrated with a small drawing in the margin. The biscuits sold out before noon. Eek 4, sold out before 11:15. Month 2, she added a second market day. Month 3, a food writer posted about Mama Jean's and the Instagram account reached 47,000 followers in 11 days. The line at the truck doubled. 3 catering inquiries arrived in the same week. Here is the thing about Kyle Preston that is easy to miss from the outside. He was not incompetent. He was capable at 60% of what the company needed, running at full capacity. For 9 years, he had access to a 40% multiplier that he had never needed to name because it had always been there. When it was gone, he did not register the subtraction immediately. Month 1 after the divorce, a pitch to an accounting firm in Germantown produced no contract. Kyle could not identify why. The food had been good, the presentation had been professional, something in the room had not moved. Month 2, a commercial real estate firm that had renewed its corporate dining contract every year for 4 years gave notice. The reason cited: the quality of service we once relied on is no longer consistent with our current expectations. 3. Kyle hired an event coordinator. 26 years old, organized, thorough, and without any particular ability to walk into a room and understand what the specific people in that room needed before they asked for it. The contracts kept going elsewhere. 4. Kyle started seeing Brittany Cole. She was 25 and appeared to need very little while quietly requiring a great deal. She moved into the house on a Thursday in October. Kyle paid for everything without tracking how much it was, which turned out to be $31,000 over 4 months. Month 5, his largest corporate campus account, a client of 3 years, sent a letter. Not an email, a letter. It said the firm was exploring alternatives. It said the decision reflected an accumulated experience over the preceding 18 months. Kyle read that line 3 times. He did not connect it to anything. Month 6. Kyle identified the Aldridge Properties opportunity. Marcus Aldridge was developing 3 new properties in the Memphis area. The food and beverage management contract for all 3 would be significant enough to stabilize Preston corporate dining for at least 2 years. Kyle reached out through a contact at a commercial real estate association. A preliminary meeting was scheduled. He began preparing his pitch. 6 weeks after the first market day, Darnell Hayes pulled Renee aside at the end of a Saturday. He said his brother-in-law had a catering truck he could not use, engine problems, sitting behind a house in Whitehaven under a tarp for 3 years. The truck was a 1997 Grumman Olson. It had not started in 2 years. The refrigeration unit was gone. One serving window was stuck halfway open. The paint was faded to something closer to gray than its original color. He didn't send anyone to help. Renee stood inside it for a few minutes. She put her hands on the prep counter. She looked at the burners and the service window and the space where she would stand. She looked at the road beyond the open bay door. She could see it. The cost to make it functional, $850 in parts. Darnell would provide the labor on Saturdays, for free, because, he said, looking slightly to the left of her rather than directly at her, a woman who stands outside in Memphis June heat with a baby on her chest for 6 Saturdays deserves a truck that starts. Renee did not have $850. He didn't send anyone to help. She had $112 in savings and 4 weeks of market earnings, most of which had gone to her share of LaShonda's utilities and Zora's diapers. He didn't send anyone to help. She went to Pastor Elmore. She told him what the truck would cost and what it would mean. She told him she had $112. The following Sunday, the congregation at Greater Hope Baptist took up a collection. $738. Renee put in the remaining $112 herself. She handed the total to Darnell on a Tuesday morning in the parking lot behind the church. He took it, nodded once, and started work the following Saturday. 3 Saturdays later, the engine turned over. The week the truck was road-ready, Renee bought a small can of deep copper paint and a can of cream paint and a brush. She painted the name herself. She used a stencil she cut from cardboard with a kitchen knife, the letters traced from a printout she had made at the library on Poplar Avenue. 2 words. Mama Jeans. She stood in front of the truck in the church parking lot on a Thursday evening. The paint was still slightly tacky. The lettering was not perfectly even. She read the name 3 times. Then she went inside and started the brine. He didn't send anyone states. In the United States, more than 60% of new food businesses close within their first year. The average cost to open a food truck from scratch runs between $30,000 and $80,000. He didn't send anyone to help. Renee had started with $286 and a borrowed folding table and was now operating a roadworthy truck at a total parts cost of $850. He didn't send anyone to help. Because of a congregation she had never asked for help. Because of a foreman who showed up on Saturdays. Because he believed something he had seen on a folding table in Overton Square in the Memphis summer heat. That is not a story about money. That is a story about what people give to someone they have decided is worth showing up for. Marcus Aldridge's assistant had been going to Mama Jean's truck on South Main for 3 weeks before Marcus found out. She ordered lunch for the team during site visits. She had not mentioned it. It was, in her words when he asked, simply the best lunch in that part of the city. He didn't send anyone to help. The morning Marcus stood at the serving window himself. His driver had pulled over near the truck on instinct because it was the closest food and the team had been walking the development site for 2 hours. Marcus ordered without looking at the menu. He ate standing next to the car. He did not move for 3 minutes after the first piece. He didn't send anyone to help. He could not explain what he was tasting. He had eaten fried chicken on 4 continents. This was something different in a way he could not articulate, which was itself unusual because Marcus Aldridge had built a 22-year career on the ability to articulate exactly what made one hospitality experience better than another. He typed 3 words to his assistant. Who runs this? 11 days later, Marcus was at the Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce business breakfast at the Peabody Hotel when he saw Renee Preston at the back of the room, working a catering setup. Zora, now 18 months old, was in a bouncer seat behind the table, positioned between the warming trays where she could see her mother and remain out of the way of guests. Marcus watched Renee work for 4 minutes before he said anything to anyone. A man in a gray suit picked up a plate and turned to walk away. Renee said something to him, 3 words or fewer. The man stopped, set his plate back down, and picked up a biscuit from the second tray. He smiled. He walked away. He didn't send anyone to help. The man had not looked at the biscuit tray before Renee spoke. She had seen something in how he was moving, or how he was holding the plate, and she had known before he knew that the biscuit was what he actually wanted. Marcus walked over. They talked for 11 minutes. He asked about the truck. She told him about the folding table and the borrowed burner and the $16. He asked about the food. She told him about Mama Jean. Not the recipe, the woman. The way her grandmother had cooked for every significant moment in the neighborhood for 40 years, without asking and without expecting to be thanked. Marcus said, what made her good at it? He didn't said, Renee said, she paid attention to people the way most people pay attention to problems. Before she ever put food in front of someone, she already knew what that specific person needed to feel. Marcus said, how did she know? Renee looked at him. She said, the same way I know you have been to events like this before, and you are here because someone asked you to be, not because you wanted to come, and you have been standing near the exit since you walked in. Marcus looked toward the exit, then back at Renee. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, how long did it take you to figure that out about me? Renee said, about 40 seconds. That was the 11-minute conversation. That evening, Marcus sat in his office with a brief his acquisitions team had prepared on Preston corporate dining, standard pre-meeting research, service history, client portfolio, retention figures, which had declined noticeably over the preceding 18 months. At the bottom of the brief, his assistant had included a note. A quote from a former Preston client pulled from an industry review. The relationship worked well for many years. The person who understood our business left. The company has not been the same since. Marcus set the folder on the desk. He did not pick up his phone. He did not call his team. He sat at the desk and looked at nothing in particular for a while. He was thinking about Beverly Douglas. Beverly had said something the last time they spoke, in the week before she signed the buyout documents, not in anger. She said it the way she said most things, directly and without performance. She said, you have never understood what you had. He had told himself she meant the operational systems, the institutional knowledge, the client relationships. Those were the things that took months to transfer and years to fully rebuild. That was not what she had meant. He understood now what she had meant. He picked up his phone. He called his assistant. He said, move the Preston corporate dining meeting. I want to visit the Mama Jean's truck on Friday. Here is the question I keep returning to. Marcus Aldridge had done this before. Not to Renee, to Beverly. He had looked at a woman who had built the foundation of his success, and he had structured the exit so that she left with the minimum he could justify and told himself it was a fair deal. He had been telling himself that for 17 years. He didn't send anyone to help. When he sat in that office and read about a company whose quality had declined in exact proportion to the departure of a woman whose name appeared on none of the documents, was he seeing Kyle Preston clearly? Or was he finally seeing himself? He didn't send anyone to help. I do not think those are different questions, and I do not think Marcus Aldridge thought so either, sitting in that office with the folder closed and the city dark below the 17th floor. Kyle Preston had been preparing his pitch for Marcus Aldridge's acquisitions team for 11 weeks. He had revised it 4 times. He had everything he needed to make a compelling case. On a Tuesday morning in September, a contact sent Kyle a link to an article with a short message. Have you seen this? The article was from a Memphis food publication. Memphis Eats, 10 Food Businesses Reshaping the City, Mama Jean's Fried Chicken, number 3. There was a photograph of Renee standing in front of the copper truck. Zora was beside her, one hand on the wheel well, looking at something in the distance with full seriousness. The article described a business that had gone from a farmer's market folding table to a food truck with 47,000 Instagram followers and a 6-day operation, all in 14 months, all from an initial investment of $286. There was a quote, "I started with one recipe and $286. Everything else is just not stopping." Kyle read the article once, then he read it again. Then he called the contact and asked, as evenly as he could, whether Marcus Aldridge had had any contact with Mama Jean's. The answer came back in 40 minutes. He didn't send anyone to help. Marcus Aldridge had visited the truck twice in the previous 3 weeks. His office had made a preliminary inquiry about a food and beverage partnership for the South Main development. Kyle sat in his office. He had taken the company. He had taken the house. He had taken both of their older sons. He had left her with $286 and a recipe card, because those were the 2 things that were not worth the paperwork. The recipe card had 47,000 followers. He didn't send anyone to help. The $286 had built something Marcus Aldridge was visiting twice a week. He didn't send anyone to help. The one deal he had left, the contract that could hold his company together, was already sitting in front of a woman he had decided, in writing, was not worth pursuing. He picked up his phone. He called Brittany. She did not answer. He sat in the office until the city went dark outside the window. He didn't send anyone to help. A producer from a Memphis news out to Renee through the catering company's Instagram in early October. The show was doing a series on Memphis entrepreneurs. They wanted to feature Mama Jean's. Renee took 24 hours to respond. She called LaShonda. LaShonda said, "What would Mama Jean say?" Renee called the producer the next morning. The crew filmed for 3 days. They arrived at the Greater Hope Baptist Fellowship Hall kitchen at 4:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. Renee was already inside. The brine had been working since midnight. Zora was asleep in a portable crib in the corner, a sound machine running beside her. The producer told the camera operator, "Shoot what you see. Do not direct anything." He didn't send anyone to help. She did not way she cooked every morning. She did not look at the camera. She did not perform. She measured and tasted and adjusted the way Mama Jean had taught her, moving through the space without hesitation, without a single unnecessary motion. The kitchen smelled like hot oil and buttermilk, and something sharp underneath that the camera crew would mention to each other later, trying to describe it. They followed her to the truck. They filmed the setup. They filmed the serving window opening at 11:30 and the first customers of the day. Darnell's crew first, as they had been most mornings for months, moving up to the window with the purposeful ease of people who have long since stopped needing to look at the menu. The producer interviewed Renee inside the truck between services. She sat on a stool with Zora on her lap. Zora had been given half a biscuit as a management strategy and was giving it her full professional attention. The producer asked, "What made you start this?" Renee looked at her hands for a moment. She said, "I left a marriage with $286 and my grandmother's recipe card. That was what was left, and I kept thinking, that is enough. Because what she gave me was not the recipe. He didn't send anyone to help. The recipe is just the reason people come the first time. What she gave me was the understanding that when you feed someone right, you are telling them that their life matters. I'd been doing that for other people's businesses for 9 years. I needed to do it for my own." She did not say his name. She did not describe the divorce. She did not say what had been taken or how. She did not need to. The segment aired on a Thursday evening, 7 o'clock news, 8.5 minutes. Memphis made Mama Jeans and the recipe that started with $286. 48 hours later, the Instagram account moved from 47,000 followers to 112,000. The line at the truck doubled. Catering inquiries came in from 3 corporate accounts. One of them was from Aldridge Properties. You already know who was watching. The house on Walnut Grove Road was the house Kyle had taken. He had bought new furniture after Renee left, changed the curtains, done what people do when they are trying to persuade a house that it belongs to them now. He didn't send anyone to help. Kyle was on the couch on a Thursday evening, his phone in his hand, the television on. Isaiah was at the other end of the couch with a book open on his lap. Jordan was on the floor, with his back against the couch, eating cereal from a bowl he had brought from the kitchen without asking. The news program came on. Jordan looked up from his bowl. He set it down on the floor carefully. He said, "Dad, that's Mom." Kyle looked up from his phone. On the screen, the copper truck, the cream lettering. Mama Jeans. The line of people stretching past the camera frame. And Renee, standing at the service window in a white apron, tilting her head the way she always had when she was listening to what someone actually needed. Isaiah put his book down. He did not look at the television. He looked at his father's face. On the screen, the reporter was describing the partnership. Marcus Aldridge appeared beside Renee outside the truck. He said, "I have been eating here for 2 months. I have been trying to explain what makes this place different for 2 months. I stopped trying to explain it and started trying to be part of it. The South Main location opens in 4 months. The other 2 properties will follow within the year." Kyle did not move. Jordan looked at his father, then at Isaiah. Isaiah was still watching their father's face. Kyle picked up his phone. His hands were not entirely steady. He typed a message to the contact at the Commercial Real Estate Association. The reply came at 11:14 that night. The Aldridge partnership with Mama Jeans. The Aldridge announced publicly this evening the corporate dining contract for the South Main property and both additional developments has been awarded to Mama Jeans. "I'm sorry, man." Kyle set the phone on the cushion beside him. He had taken the company. He had taken the house. He had taken their 2 older sons. He had spent 4 months preparing a pitch for the one deal that could save what remained. The deal was already signed. He didn't send anyone to help. By the $286 he had called not worth the paperwork. Kyle came to the truck on a Saturday 11 days after the segment aired. He wore a suit that was not right for the Memphis October heat. He stood at the back of the line. He didn't send anyone to help. When he reached the window, Rasee was inside. She saw him through the glass before he said anything. She finished wrapping an order. She handed it to the customer. She looked at Kyle. Kyle said the children's names first. He didn't send anyone to help. He said Isaiah was struggling in school and Jordan had stopped going to basketball practice. He said they needed their mother more than the current arrangement allowed. He was not lying. Isaiah had gone quiet in a particular way over the past 2 months. Jordan had come home from school 3 days that week and gone directly to his room. Kyle had noticed and had not known what to do. Renee said, "I call them every night. I have them every other weekend. That is what the court established." Kyle said, "I can make the schedule more flexible." Renee looked at him. Kyle shifted. He said, "Marcus Aldridge is someone I have been in professional discussions with. This situation creates a complication for me." Renee said, "I know." Kyle said, "If you would be willing to simply tell him that our personal history has no bearing on your professional judgment of my company. That is all I am asking." Renee said, "I'm not going to do that." Kyle tried one more. He said, "We built something together. 9 years. Whatever happened between us, I am the father of your children. You owe me something." Renee closed the serving window. Not hard, not with any performance. She slid it shut the way you close a window at the end of a day when the weather has changed. She turned back to her prep counter. She picked up a cloth and started cleaning the surface. Her assistant Jasmine, 19 years old, was at the back of the truck. She said quietly, "You okay?" Renee said, "Get the next batch started." Kyle stood at the closed window for a moment. Then he walked back to his car. Kyle Preston called the owner of Memphis Cold Storage on a Tuesday morning, 3 days later. Memphis Cold Storage handled Renee's refrigerated supply deliveries twice a week. Kyle had worked with the owner, a man named Garrett, 4 years earlier on a different contract. He still had the number. He told Garrett that Renee had outstanding business debt from her time at Preston Corporate Dining that had not been resolved in the divorce proceedings. He said the amounts were not trivial. He said he thought Garrett should know before finalizing any long-term supply agreements. None of this was true. Garrett said he would review the account. What Kyle did not know was that Marcus Aldridge's legal and acquisitions team had been conducting standard pre-contract due diligence on all vendors and suppliers connected to the South Main development since the partnership announcement. This was not a targeted investigation. It was the same process Marcus ran before any commercial agreement of significant value. He didn't flag the communication between Kyle Preston and Garrett at Memphis Cold Storage within 72 hours. The report landed on Marcus Aldridge's desk on a Tuesday morning. He read it twice. He called his lead attorney. He cleared his 11 o'clock. He called Kyle Preston at 11:07. Kyle answered on the first ring. Marcus said, "I am withdrawing from all preliminary discussions with Preston Corporate Dining. My attorney will send formal notification today." Kyle said, "Marcus, listen, I can explain." He didn't send anyone to help. Marcus said, "We have documentation of your communication with Memphis Cold Storage. I want you to understand that I intend to share that documentation with every commercial real estate and hospitality association contact in the Mid-South." He said, "We are done." He hung up. Kyle held the phone. The screen went dark. He set it on the desk. He looked at the framed photo on the shelf from the company anniversary event 3 years ago. Renee was at the edge of the frame, half out of the shot, because she had been the one setting up the tables when someone pressed the button. He sat in the office until it was dark outside. Then he sat there a while longer. 18 months after the Aldridge partnership was announced, Mama Jean's had 3 operating locations: the South Main development, the East Memphis Corporate Tower on Poplar Avenue, the Germantown Professional Park on Wolf River Boulevard. A 4th location was under construction. 23 employees, a catering division that handled events in all 3 Aldridge properties, 189,000 Instagram followers. Preston Corporate Dining filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection 9 months after the Aldridge contract was awarded. The Walnut Grove house went on the market. It sold in 31 days. Brittany Cole moved out in March. She took the furniture, the television, and a BMW sedan that Kyle had co-signed. She left without leaving a note. Kyle Preston was in a 2-bedroom rental in Germantown. He called Isaiah and Jordan every Sunday evening. Isaiah picked up most of the time now. Jordan almost always picked up. 6 months after the bankruptcy filing, Renee petitioned the court for a modification to the custody arrangement. The grounds were straightforward. Kyle's housing had changed significantly twice. In 1 year, his finances were unstable, and Isaiah and Jordan had submitted a written request, drafted by Isaiah and signed by Jordan, asking to live with their mother. The judge reviewed the petition and approved the modification. Isaiah and Jordan moved their things to Renee's apartment on a Saturday in May, 1 week before the second Aldridge location opened. Isaiah carried boxes. Jordan walked through every room twice before he agreed to put anything down. He didn't send anyone to help. Zora, who was 2 years and 9 months old, followed Jordan through both walkthroughs with one hand on the wall for balance and a biscuit in her other hand, inspecting everything with the seriousness of someone who has been running quality control for some time. The prep kitchen in the South Main Aldridge development had Renee's name on the lease. She had not been able to say that about any space she had ever occupied in her adult life. Her name on a lease for a kitchen. He didn't send anyone to help. On the first morning before her team arrived, she stood at her station and set up her tools the way Mama Jean had taught her. Everything in its place before you begin, because the work should never have to wait for the preparation. She opened the tin box. She took out the index card. She read it, not because she needed to. She had the brine memorized. She could make it in the dark, which she had more than once. She read it the way you read something a person who loved you wrote down. Carefully. Not for the information. For the handwriting. Buttermilk, cayenne, black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, smoked paprika, a pinch of brown sugar. And at the bottom of the card, in smaller letters, "The thing I add last is not in any recipe. You'll figure it out." Renee folded the card. She put it back in the tin. She set the tin on the shelf above her station, not inside a bag, not in a drawer, on the shelf, where it would stay. Isaiah walked in first. He was 14 now. He looked around the space the way he had started looking at everything his mother built, with a quiet, careful attention that had developed sometime in the past year and a half, and that she recognized as something she had not taught him. He saw the apron hanging on the hook by the door. She had put it there for him. He took it down, put it on, went to the sink, and washed his hands without being asked. Jordan came in behind him. He looked at the ceiling, the equipment, the line of stations. He said, "It's big." Renee said, "It's ours." She started the brine. The kitchen filled with the smell of hot oil and buttermilk. And something sharp underneath, the cayenne, always the cayenne, and something else deeper that took her 37 years to identify as the thing Mama Jean had not written down. Isaiah stopped moving for 1 second. He didn't send anyone to help. He was standing at the sink. He had been about to reach for a bowl. He stopped and looked up at nothing in particular, the way people look when a smell pulls them somewhere they have been before. He had smelled this in the truck, in the apartment at LaShonda's, in the church kitchen in the dark at 4 in the morning. He had always known what it was. He didn't send anyone to help, but not like this, not in a room with her name on the wall, not on a morning when the people he loved were standing around him with their hands ready to work. He picked up the bowl. He came to stand beside her. He did not ask what to do. He already knew. He kept coming back to what Mama Jean wrote at the bottom of that card. "The thing I add last is not in any recipe. You'll figure it out." He had been thinking about what she meant. I think she meant it was different for every person who carried that card forward. A different ingredient, a different understanding, something that could not be written down because it only existed in the hands of the specific person doing the work. For Renee, I think the last thing she added was the 18 months. Not as a lesson, as a proof, as a demonstration, for herself, for Isaiah and Jordan, for anyone paying attention, that what you inherit from the people who loved you cannot be included in a divorce settlement. It does not have a line item. It does not appear on a balance sheet. Kyle Preston had every document. He had the company and the house and the accounts and the attorney and 4 months of preparation and the pitch that was going to save everything. He had everything that could be put in a folder and carried into a meeting. He missed the card. He called it not worth the paperwork. He didn't send anyone to help. By the time he understood what it was worth, she had already put it on a sign and fed it to thousands of people. Some things do not end up on documents. That is not a weakness. That is exactly why they last. Tell me something. You didn't send anyone to help. If the person who took everything from you came back, not to apologize, not to make anything right, but because they needed the one thing that only you could give, What would you do? Did you close the window? Or would you open it anyway? You didn't send anyone to help. Because some of you are going to say you would find a way to be generous, and some of you already know exactly what Renee knew when she slid that window shut. Leave your answer below. Subscribe if this story stayed with you. See you in the next one. This story is a work of fiction. The names, characters, and events are entirely imagined, but the invisible labor that holds businesses and families together, he didn't send anyone to help. And the people whose names never appear on the documents that record what they built, those are real. If you are navigating a divorce and concerned about your rights to shared business contributions, property, your custody arrangements, legal aid organizations in your state offer free consultations. Understanding what you are entitled to is not optional. It is necessary. Thank you for watching.